All right, let's talk about Purdue as well. They have an extreme lack of consistency. And when I say that about Purdue, I less mean, and this is what I mentioned before, I don't mean as much that it's inconsistency with the team from game to game. I mean, it's inconsistency with the individual players from game to game. Braden Smith in this game was inhibited, and Fletcher Lawyer showed up, right? That's what you want from your number two guy. This is a great moment from Fletcher Lawyer because you want there's games later in the year where your star player, someone like Braden Smith, might be singled out defensively. They might be focusing on him defensively and trying to take him out of the game. That's what IU did. And Fletcher Lawyer showed up. You need your number two guy to then put up number one guard level production, and that's exactly what Fletcher Lawyer did. But a game or two before, Fletcher Lawyer was completely absent and scored single digits, right? It's very confusing. Fletcher Lawyer is inconsistent. Braden Smith, some games goes crazy, and other games is very well contained by the other team. There's still no premier set of two scorers from game to game, and this is the way I'm going to explain this, because this is the way I think it makes the most sense to me, is that fundamentally what you want in a perfect world, if you're playing a team that's inferior defensively, what you want is Braden Smith to be your number one scorer in the backcourt and your number one shooter in the backcourt as well, and Fletcher Lawyer to be number two. The first flaw is the fact that, sure, Braden Smith's pretty good most of the time. But even if he is, Fletcher Lawyer hasn't fully fulfilled the role or filled the shoes of being that second scorer. He's not producing at a number two guard level a decent amount of the time, enough for us to be able to call it inconsistent. And then some games, there's going to be a situation where Braden Smith is singled out he's singled out by the defense, and he's isolated. Braden Smith is struggling because the defense is really focusing on him. That's where Fletcher Lawyer can shine. He did shine in this game against IU, but then there's no second scorer after Fletcher Lawyer. There's no one that can consistently produce in the backcourt, and that's not the backcourt's fault, in my opinion, because most of it is young. The two players that aren't young are Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer. Braden Smith has fully grown into his role as that upperclassman that's in position to succeed. Fletcher Lawyer, in my opinion, hasn't quite fulfilled that role himself yet, and that's one of the flaws, is that I don't think that there's a second premier scorer, a second premier shooter in the backcourt that Purdue can sort of rely on. Again, this game is exactly the type of performance that could disprove that. Fletcher Lawyer played fantastically. But then after that, there's no one else to step up, and it's because the backcourt's so young, and that's totally fine. I'm not blaming Miles Colvin or CJ Cox that they shouldn't be asked to perform at that level at this stage in their college career, at least on a consistent basis. But regardless, that's one of the flaws that I'm seeing with Purdue. There's still no premier set of two scorers from game to game. In this game, Braden Smith was inhibited. He was defended very well. Fletcher Lawyer showed up. That was great to see from him. That's one of my, if I were taking away wins for Purdue, like they lost the game, but what did they win? They won the fact that Fletcher Lawyer performed very, very well, despite the adversity that the Boilermaker backcourt was facing. The other issue, though, on the defensive side of the basketball, and we did a video on this last week, you're welcome to watch it if you'd like, about rim protection and about the flaws of Purdue. And rim protection is one of them. Trey Galloway had 15. Malik Renew had 15. They were striking into the lane with ease. And part of that is Trey Galloway's killer floater, right? He's phenomenal with shots like that at the elbow or just inside the lane. Malik Renew, of course, is fantastic at slicing to the basket. But Purdue's rim protection really has struggled, and it's because Zach Edey is missing, and it's because this team has sort of grown accustomed to the idea of Zach Edey being just locked in the center of the floor, and he's going to scare people out of the lane. Trey Kaufman-Renn is fantastic. I think he defends very well, but he doesn't have that imposing presence where players are afraid of getting to the basket. There comes a point in the year, and we're at the point in the year where teams are realizing, Michigan State was the first to really do it, where teams are realizing that you can get to the basket. You can set up alley-oop dunks. You can drive, right? You can do that against Purdue, which is an idea that hasn't fully been understood prior to this season because Zach Edey's always been there. But you can get to the rim on Purdue, and you can get to the rim very effectively on Purdue. The rim protection issues, to me, continued. You can tell because, again, Galloway and Renew each scored the most, and if you watch this game, as most of you watching this video I'm sure did, you realize that they were getting to the basket, they were getting inside. It was 2-point field goals. It was in between the elbows and the blocks. That's where Renew and Galloway were putting their points on the board, and it's concerning because Trey Kaufman-Renn was all alone down there defensively, and sure, Caleb First helps, and they scheme up situations where they could potentially contends, but Trey Kaufman-Ren's there all alone, and he can't be that defensively because he's just not as physically imposing as Zach Edey was. And that rim protection flaw is the major flaw on defense, and that paired with the fact that there's not a second premier shooter to keep Purdue in games, that's the reason why I don't think Purdue is a championship contender, and I don't think they're a team capable of qualifying for the Final Four as they have in recent seasons. The other issue I noticed was the turnovers. Just if you don't know the numbers, I mean, I'm sure if you were watching the game, you understood the turnover problem, but Purdue lost a turnover battle 16-7. Indiana scored 23 points off turnovers. Purdue scored 12. That is absolutely unacceptable. 16-7 is a mark that is completely unacceptable. On the road against a rival, and you're not taking care of the basketball, those three things, that's right away a team that's bound to lose. That's a complete recipe for disaster. And that's going to be a narrative in March, right? When we get to March and when we get to the point where Purdue is going to be asked to perform at a high level against high-quality opponents, they may be able to, but if you're turning the ball over that consistently, you're going to get blown out, right? You're going to get blown out by Auburn. You're going to get blown out by Duke, something like that. Purdue's not in a position to succeed if they continue to turn the ball over this much, and that's exactly what they did against Indiana. That was something that we were discussing heading into the game, is the thought of if Purdue takes care of the basketball, they might just be totally fine regardless of how Smith plays and Trey Kaufman-Renn and Lawyer and all those guys. But again, the turnovers for Purdue were atrocious. The rim protection, again, still is a major flaw, and there's just no second score from game to game. It's either Braden Smith, and he's the only one shooting effectively in the backcourt, typically, or he's inhibited, and it's Fletcher Lawyer the one that's stepping up, but there's not a second guy. And when Braden Smith is on, Fletcher Lawyer usually isn't on too. If they can figure that out, and if they can make that click, and they can have two guys in the backcourt really shooting well, then I feel much more confident about Purdue, even despite their rim protection issues, because at the end of the day, if you can't defend the rim, that's fine, because if they're scoring 2 on you on certain possessions and you're going back the other way and scoring 3, it's totally okay, right? Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, if they can both produce at a high level, and it doesn't have to be Fletcher Lawyer, I just assume it would be as the fellow upperclassman experienced guard that's had certainly a lot of tournament experience. Purdue has a lot of tournament experience. There's a chance that they'll be totally fine. Obviously, they're a team that's prone to losing early and getting upset early on in the first round. Also, a team that went to a national championship last year. So Purdue's capable of a lot, right? They're capable of really a wide range of results when we get to the tournament. But to me, I don't think they're a championship contender because the turnover issue, and I think which can be fixed, but then the fundamental flaws that I see in the composition of this roster and the composition of this team on the floor are the rim protection and the lack of a second premier shooter. That's why I think Purdue lost this game, on top of the reasons why I think IU won it. And the combination of those two things really is a recipe for 73-58. We saw evidence of that last Sunday. Moving forward for Purdue, they've lost 4 straight. They're slipping in the seeding. They were debating pushing for a 2 seed to a surefire 3 seed to a surefire 4 seed to maybe dropping down to even being a 5. But again, Purdue, they've lost 4 straight. They're well out of the Big Ten title conversation. They may be mathematically eliminated. I assume they are. I believe Purdue's 11-6 in conference, and Michigan State and Michigan are both 13-3. So I suppose they're not out of the conversation yet. But certainly it feels like it's entirely out of reach in terms of the regular season title. The rest of the season for Purdue is UCLA, Rutgers, and then they go to Illinois. So 2 more games in Mackey Arena. They're currently 6th in the Big Ten. UCLA is 5th. Those 2 teams are tied or maybe half a game separated. It's a very tight margin, I believe half a game separating 3rd through 6th. Not that it matters. Obviously, it'd be nice to see Purdue get a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. But the UCLA game will be critical for positioning, like I said. They could reasonably reach the 3 spot. So the UCLA game probably will decide whether or not Purdue is the 6 or closer to the 3, or potentially the 4 getting the double bye. To me, that's a double bye elimination game. Because if you win, then you're in the double bye range, obviously depending on what the other teams in that neighborhood do. But if you lose, not only do you drop a game and fall that much further back with only 2 games left, but also one of the teams, you just handed the other team that you're contending with a win in that contention and a tiebreaker potentially. So Purdue's in a spot where I think that UCLA game is a double bye elimination game. Not that it matters. Purdue's in the field no matter what. Their performance in the Big Ten tournament probably won't have that much of an impact, and certainly whether or not they play play on day 2 or day 3 of the tournament is probably not going to have that much of an impact. But it's notable nonetheless. They're 6th in the Big Ten. UCLA, Rutgers, and at Illinois. Some wide ranges of quality of opponents there. I think UCLA and Illinois on the road are some good build-up opportunities for the Big Ten tournament and beyond. Rutgers a little tune-up in between, just in case they need to get right. Across the board, right? Indiana is trending up at the right time. Purdue's floundering. They've got to recalibrate. They have some opportunities now. UCLA is beatable. They're a flawed team in their own right. Rutgers is beatable. They're not good. They won't make the tournament. Illinois on the road is a tough one. Purdue's got opportunities now to potentially find themselves in a situation where they can find their footing and move forward and find success in the tournament, but I don't think they're championship contenders. They're certainly now not Big Ten title contenders, and I'm curious to see how far they can go in the NCAA tournament. I don't think they can get further than the Sweet 16. I think that's their ceiling. I don't imagine a world where Purdue gets past a 1 seed and a team that can score and a team that can get to the rim and a team that can, defend the backcourt and single away Braden Smith. Like I just don't see a world where Purdue beats Duke, or I don't see a world where Purdue beats Auburn in the tournament at this point in the year. With that said, we'll see how it goes. They've got a few more regular season games to really put themselves in position to succeed, and then the Big Ten tournament after that. But I'm worried about Purdue, and this IU loss absolutely showed me why.